It's amazing. It's amazing. The Michael Decon program. Is the embassy.
Ladies and gentlemen, for allowing us into your hearts and into your minds. Here we are again on a night like this. Yes, come on in everybody, don't be shy. First time listeners out there, thanks for finding us. We hope you stick around. You found true salvation. In tonight's broadcast, we confront some of the toughest questions about power, corruption, and hidden influence that others shy away from. We'll be talking about the Zionist control in American politics, to the mysterious origins of Jeffrey Epstein's empire. We explore allegations that cut to the core of global geopolitics and spiritual warfare. Tonight won't be for the faint of heart. Tonight is a full house, ladies and gentlemen. My first guest this evening is Kevin Barrett. He's a fearless voice in alternative media. He's a relentless seeker of truth behind the official stories we're fed. Known for his critical examination of geopolitical events and his bold challenges to mainstream accounts. Then on the second half of the program is none other than Mr. Leo Zagami. Renowned for exposing the hidden forces of religious and political power, Mr. Zagami's groundbreaking book, The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, delves into the shadowy sect behind Jeffrey Epstein's monstrous legacy, blending history, secret societies, and spiritual warfare. Now without further ado, let's get down to brass tacks and bring in our first guest. And with me right now is Mr. Kevin Barrett. How's it going?
I'm doing fine. Just got done writing an obituary for Dick Cheney, and that's a bright spot.
Really? How excited are you to find out that Dick Cheney is no longer amongst us?
Well, I think we're not allowed to celebrate the deaths of Republicans anymore.
Oh, okay.
After the false flag shooting of Charlie Kirk by the Israelis, it's now illegal to do anything but mourn and weep tears of grief when a Republican gets shot.
But what if he's not really a hero? Like, some people do consider like Charlie Kirk like a hero, but I don't think a lot of people would sort of agree that Dick Cheney is one of those people.
Well, there are probably like 2 or 3 people around somewhere who think Cheney is a hero, but I would sort of hate to actually get to meet them. But yeah, you're right. Charlie Kirk was certainly more personable rather, and far the kind of human being.
Probably a little bit more likable.
Actually like.
Yeah, I was gonna
say.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, if we want to get technical, like, we could hate on Cheney because he was involved in killing millions of people for lies.
Right.
And Charlie Kirk ran a lot of interference for this genocide of Gaza.
Right.
And so people had every reason to say bad things about that. But yeah, whatever. I mean, I personally think you should just say what you think. Even if somebody just died.
Yeah, well, I don't really disagree with you on that. I mean, this is where I am. I think you're allowed to say these sort of things, but those sort of lines have been blurred, unfortunately, here in America. And we could get into all of that. But speaking of Dick Cheney, what first drew you to sort of question the official narrative around 9/11 and the global politics for that matter?
Well, when 9/11 happened, a lot of people in my corner of the academy, as well as people all over the Muslim world, including high level people, were initially very skeptical. We all said, "What? Come on, really? Al Qaeda? Really? This is sure going to benefit Israel." Uh, wouldn't surprise me if they did it, but we'll probably never know. That was my take. But and a couple of years after that, I was very busy finishing writing a dissertation and getting my PhD. I did take a look at what David Ray Griffin was working on. He was preparing his first book, The New Pearl Harbor, and I got wind of that. I was a big fan of his work. I thought he was probably the best person in the world in terms of looking at disputed topics, including pretty complicated ones, empirical topics, and figuring out, what the likely truth about such topics would be. So when I heard Griffin was saying that, oh, they blew up the World Trade Center and, it wasn't hijacked planes that did whatever damage was done and so on and so forth, I was kind of shocked. I said, I didn't know it. Really? So I looked into it starting in December 2023. And it blew my mind at how obvious it was and how flimsy and indeed kind of ridiculous the official story was. And that angered me. It reawakened the trauma from my years in high school when at age 15, I had discovered the problem with the JFK assassination when I saw Mark Lane speak at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in like 1974. So I flashed back to that and I thought, yeah, I've just finished my PhD. Am I going to be spending 7 years trying to get tenure somewhere, keeping my mouth shut about this? I don't think so. So I became sort of a troublemaker, 9/11 truth teach-in, scholars for 9/11 truth
Yeah.
academic gadfly. And then the Republican Party, Lynn Cheney in particular, Dick's wife, who's smarter than he was, her group ACTA, which was the thought police for the academy, decided to nominate me as the official whipping boy for the Scholars for 9/11 Truth. So they came after me at the University of Wisconsin, demanded that I be fired. The university investigated me, found that I had done nothing wrong, and I was a very good teacher, so they couldn't fire me. So that battle raged for 6 months, from the summer of 2006 through December, and I got 6 months worth of 15 minutes of fame, which then made me unemployable in the American Academy after that, but did give me a sort of a fallback career as a political troublemaker. And so I've been
Right.
troublemaking ever since.
Well, that's quite the introduction there for those who don't know you. But yes, you are a bit of a hellraiser, as they call them. Not my words exactly, but that's kind of how they label folks like yourself. But yeah, you created quite a bit of controversy, and it led to all sorts of places. You were on, what was it, CNN? You were on Fox. You were on PBS. You were featured all
Yeah, I
over the
was.
place for a while there.
Yeah. I was that 9/11 professor, that
Right.
conspiracy professor.
And did you, in terms of like, let's say, like the staff there, the people, the other teachers, the faculty, did they sort of also feel the same way you did, or were they a bit more skeptical about you? Anything of that nature?
Well, every single colleague that I talked about 9/11 with,
Yeah.
prior to when I got witch hunted, uh, said essentially the same thing, which is, Kevin, you could very well be right, but I don't really want to look into this and find out the details because I just don't want to know.
Right.
I think they all kind of, and then once I got witch hunted, they felt even more that way because, okay, this is what happens if you talk about it.
That's
You
right.
get dragged on Fox News.
Exactly. Exactly. And what is your current assessment of the academic freedom in universities currently?
I think it's gotten worse
You think it's
over
gotten
time.
worse?
Yeah. Now, I mean, it's gotten worse throughout my whole lifetime. I got into the academy because I thought that it was supposed to be a place where we could be public intellectuals and critique what needs to be critiqued. And maybe we'll get some things wrong, but basically we're supposed to go out and poke at the sacred cows. That's our job, or a lot of it anyway, I thought, at least in the humanities and social sciences and so on. But that spirit was actually not as strong as I had assumed. And but had no problem hanging around with professors and graduate students who were fearlessly talking about all sorts of things,
Mhm.
violating all sorts of taboos. Like my JFK assassination interpretation that it was a coup d'etat was widely shared among most of my colleagues throughout most of my career. And nobody was afraid to talk about it. Most people wouldn't choose that as their academic career path because it
Sure.
was a lousy career path. But still, everybody knew and nobody had the slightest fear of talking about it. So but then 9/11 happened, and the rules seemed when they just changed overnight.
They did.
And yeah, and it got worse in all these ways. The woke movement then became ultra censorious. So you're getting censorship from the left as well as the right. And now it's like the left and the right just keep trying to outdo each other. Like who can be even more of a prig and be even more, devoted to silencing anybody that challenges your idiotic orthodoxy.
That's what troubles me the most in terms of the way politics have evolved since or post 9/11. What we have become here in America is pretty insane. But what you're saying though resonates with me, where you have both sides kind of out trying to outdo one another, and both come across as giant assholes to me, to be honest with you. So I can't really sort of get behind either the left or the right. I don't even know what either one stands for anymore. And these two parties are pretty archaic to me, Mr. Barrett.
Yeah, no, I feel exactly the same way. And in particular, the way they've both been complicit in the destruction of free speech and free discussion is really disgusting. First, when I was doing this around 9/11, it was more the left and the Democrats who
Yeah,
were open to hearing about it because they didn't like Bush and Cheney uh, for good reason.
I
But
remember.
a
Yeah.
lot of the Republicans got rallied behind this, wave the flag, and you're an evil terrorist if you question anything Bush and Cheney are doing.
Oh,
So
yes.
that went till 2008. Suddenly Obama was in office, and then that put all the Democrats to sleep. And so now, if you're going to have a rabble rouser, real or fake, it has to be somebody like Donald Trump. And for the Democrats, the left has all been terrorized by Trump and then by COVID into not supporting free speech anymore. And then the right, which was better for a while, I thought, right? They were like, they were the ones who said we should be able to say whatever we want about COVID
We thought
and
so.
Trump.
Yeah.
And, yeah, we thought so. But now they're in power, and they're like getting people fired for looking askance at Charlie Kirk. I mean,
I
what's
know
this
that. Well,
about?
that's the other thing. As soon as that happened, I was a little bit surprised to see so many people celebrating him getting shot. And again, you're allowed to do that, but I thought, getting people fired over it's kind of going a little too far. Personally, I'm never going to be a supporter of any sort of SJW type of movement of get people fired, no matter what they're saying. To be honest with you, because I believe firmly in freedom of speech and other things. I mean, if you're not physically harming anyone, then I think you should be sort of allowed to do that in this country. But that's just my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong. Someone could argue about it all day, but quite frankly, I don't really care.
Yeah, I mean, it all to me, it's not so much, if you say that so and so was celebrating, the death of Charlie Kirk or Dick Cheney or whoever. I think that expression doesn't necessarily tell you very much. I mean, you need to look at the specific utterance, look at the tweet, look at what the person actually said,
Yeah.
and it's very possible a lot of it was probably very tasteless and stupid. I didn't
Yeah,
see that
yeah,
much of it,
yeah.
but so
There was
that's
a lot of
yeah,
that,
but
but
right,
again,
if somebody
they're
really
young.
hates if somebody hates Charlie Kirk or hates Dick Cheney and says, "Ah, man, the world's better off without that creep. Yeah, this guy he was a genocide genocide complicit. Charlie Kirk should have been hanged, or 9/11 complicit Dick Cheney should have been hanged," which I actually agree with. But so why, if somebody says that and that's their true view, oh, is that does that contravene the First Amendment? No, the First
No,
Amendment has very limited restrictions, limited exceptions. Like you can't do defamation, you can't do true threats, you can't do illegal conspiracies to commit crimes. It used to be you couldn't do pornography and obscenity, although that's been rolled back by the creepy people in our court system.
Right.
But yeah, very limited exceptions. And so just saying this stuff about somebody that died that you don't like, it's tasteless, and maybe you should be sort of, talked back to, or even, shunned a little bit. But like deplatforming people,
Yeah.
silencing people, firing them from their jobs,
That's a little
insane.
much. Yeah, it's a little much.
Yeah, it's
These are
ridiculous.
mostly really young people just saying anything really. And again, I don't think they should get fired for anything of that sort, to be honest with you. But again, these are just our opinions. And by the way, really like a lot of your work on your website, like a lot of the articles. And I've been I guess you could say a supporter of yours, Kevin, for quite some time. And you describe Israel as a criminal fake state, I believe, and accuse it of orchestrating the destruction of America. I think a lot of people can agree with you on that.
More and more people are coming around to that point of view. Yeah, I think when I first kind of got ahead of the crowd on that, it was even in the 9/11 truth movement, there were people who thought maybe that was I getting out of line
Oh,
by
yeah.
talking that way about
During
Israel.
that part, yeah, during that early stage, post 9/11, questioning the narrative automatically deemed you as like a traitor scumbag of America.
Right. And then people who kind of went the whole 9 yards and started looking into sort of the roots of this Israel problem, and then casting aspersions on the historical authenticity of every element of the Holocaust narrative and things like that. That was there are a lot of these third rails involved with that that whole strand of thinking. But I just I couldn't resist because, well, what I discovered from the experience of getting all that publicity as that 9/11 conspiracy professor, and fighting with Hannity, and it stirred things up and got the message out that there were a lot of people skeptical about 9/11. It was quite effective to court some controversy.
And I
And
thank
so
Hannity, by the way, for having him or having you on his program because that's actually initially how I first heard of you
Oh,
all those
okay. Yeah, a
years
lot of
ago.
people. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of people like that, including some people who did amazing things for the 9/11 Truth Movement. There's the guy who did the Patriots Question 9/11 website, which
Yeah.
is a really good list of all of these qualified people who were 9/11 skeptics. Well, he didn't know anything about it until he just happened to run across me on Hannity.
On there,
And
yeah.
yeah, so
Do you think his opinion has shifted at all? By the way, because he's a talking head for Fox, but as you and everybody else at home knows, everyone's opinion, public opinion, is much different than private opinion.
that's a good question. I mean, if he's that much of a professional liar, well, it's possible.
Well, well, they all are, and anyone in the media and on that network, yeah, they're just doing their job. So, I mean, look at Tucker
Yeah.
Carlson, for instance. That's another person I wanted to bring up to you. As you know, he was very much like Hannity, very anti 9/11, called people insane, basically. And now you see his evolution. Do you think he actually does believe the things he's saying now, or do you think he's just, again, another sort of a hired gun for this sort of deal?
No, I think he's basically sincere. A lot of people
So he
are.
evolved, in other words.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there's this built-in module in the human brain that, like, was it Mark Twain who said that it's a man can never be can never learn anything if it would threaten his bread and butter. I think Mark Twain said it more wittily than that, but that there's a sort of a filter that filters out stuff that would be threatening to your social standing. That let's say there's some information out there that if you actually locked into it and paid attention to it, and let it into your mind, and then you would feel obliged to talk about it, and what you would say would get you fired from your job, or would lead to everybody thinking badly of you. So I think there's like a filter that just prevents you from even seeing it in the first place. You just don't go there. And there's so many people following that half consciously or even completely unconsciously. So I think Tucker was probably like that. Like, for instance, Ron Unz, the king of the red pill internet scholars, is somebody who was very mainstream right up until, well after 9/11. I think towards the like 7-8 years after 9/11, he got red pilled by looking into the US POWs left behind in Vietnam. And once he discovered that, it blew his mind. How could they have covered that up? And he started looking at some of these other topics, and now he's got an amazing body of work. So I think that very smart people like Uns, and maybe not quite that smart people like Tucker Carlson, are quite capable of fooling themselves by just imbibing the zeitgeist around them and not questioning it. And at some level, they know if they questioned it in certain ways that it would be really bad for their career and their social standing. So it just doesn't happen. And so only on rare occasions does something break through that. So I've been trying to find ways to kind of give people opportunities where they can break through that conditioning and see this stuff. And I don't know if I'm doing them a favor or not, really, frankly, or even if I'm doing the world a favor. Right? Sometimes I think, well, okay, so I helped blow up faith in the media.
The world's catching up.
It Donald Trump.
The world is catching up, though, to some of the things you put out there. Obviously, you were a bit ahead of the curve, and other people are starting to do a lot of realizing or noticing, as they say. And again, how do you respond to the accusations of you being anti-Semitic?
Well, there's all sorts of possible ways to respond. From whether you could talk about what that expression actually means, and there's so many levels at which it's a very misleading expression. Number one, this notion that Jews have Semitic ancestry. Not so much. It's the Arabs are the true Semites, because Semitic is actually a language category, not a race category, and so it's a complete hoax at that level. It's a hoax at the level that that this indoctrination that we have in this culture, that Jews have always been innocent victims and have always been persecuted. So the conflict between Jews and non-Jews has always been the fault of the non-Jews. And people joke about how, that's like the guy who got kicked out of 109 bars, and it was always the bartender's fault.
Right.
Right. So you can go at it that way. Or, I could go at it from a personal level and just say, well, I don't think I'm prejudiced against Jewish people, because if I hear that you're of Jewish background, my first thought is, well, you're probably a little sharper, a little better educated, maybe a little better sense of humor than the average person. I expect you to be a little bit urbane and witty and possibly fun. And I actually don't really have preconceptions about what you think about Israel or the Jewish tribe, because I've met Jewish people with all kinds of views on this stuff. And I used to kind of gravitate towards ones, I guess I still do even, who were sort of anti-tribalist, black sheep, troublemakers like me. So I'm not prejudiced against Jewish people. I've had lots of Jewish friends throughout my life, and still do, and have a lot of Jewish people on my radio show. So that's not it. It's my issue is that the Jewish tribalism thing is a huge problem, because it's worked so well. It's created this super ethnocentric group of relatively capable people who have, because of their capable ethnocentrism, they can create mafias and get stuff done at the expense of others. And that's led to everything from this group of 2% of Americans taking over as the dominant ethnicity post World War II from the Protestants, and then doing a lot of pursuing policies that are perhaps not in the interests of the majority, to Zionism, which is essentially just Israel is just a euphemism for the genocide of Palestine. It's just insane that these people can say, well, our tribal God told us 3,000 years ago that this was our land, so we're going to come and kill you and expel you and steal your stuff.
Hey, what was promised to them, Kevin? Come on.
Yeah. Right. It's criminal insanity. And so some of that criminal insanity is rooted in Jewish religion and culture, in the defects of Jewish religion and culture, and or you could argue bad interpretations of it, because there are good ones too. But so anyway, that's the kind of thing I would get into when people would ask about anti-Semitism, and I could probably talk.
And by the way, do you believe though that there is anti-Semitism though, just in general out there?
I don't think it's a good word. I think it's a misleading word. It's been so abused it should be retired. I think there is, there are people who hate Jewish people just for being Jewish. That's prejudice. It's like people who kind of cringe in fear when they see a black person, or and imagine bad things, or or for whatever reason they hate like Chinese people.
That's a little different, right?
Right. There are these kinds of prejudices, and I think partly because of the misdeeds of Zionists and ethnic Jews, that there's been a reaction, a normal and natural reaction, but some of that reaction, some people are pretty crude in their feelings and the way they talk. And so some of those people, and also we tend to overgeneralize. So yeah, I think there's plenty of condemnable anti-Jewish feeling out there, as well as plenty of totally justifiable anti-Jewish feeling.
I don't think people really know how to discern or differentiate between criticism of Israeli policies from actual anti-Semitic rhetoric, I think, personally speaking.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that there's what we need is discernment, and look at each particular instance. And I've always challenged people that ask me about this, or even don't like they think I'm anti-Semitic. Like who there's some of these specific people, like that guy Dan, what's his name? Dan, the guy who wrote the Quetzalcoatl book that was a bestseller, and I got on his show
hmm
once. Daniel, whatever his
I'm forgetting his name actually too.
Yeah. Yeah, that you probably know him. Anyway, I got him to read Laurent Guyonneau's From Yahweh to Zion, which is a critique of Jewish identity, politics, and religion, going back 3,000 years. He read it. He said it was anti-Semitic, but he wouldn't get into any details about it. He wouldn't discuss it with me, and so yeah, but you get weird reactions like this. I would rather, and other times I've discussed it with kind of relatively mainstreamish Jewish people. Well, Duvid, I guess, isn't that mainstream, but he and I had really good conversation. He's a very strict believing Orthodox Jew, and mildly anti-Zionist, but he's not like a Nature Carta kind of person. And we had a good conversation, and he didn't really disagree with me that much, although he does think that the core of the Jewish religion is it's his thing. But he said the reason that people hate what you're saying, Kevin, and the reason Jewish people hate what you're saying, is that it really goes against their narrative. They
Pretty
just can't
much.
take it.
I don't think you're anti-Semitic though, Kevin, for the record.
Well, thank you.
I never thought that
appreciate
about you.
Yeah, I mean, I might have a few prejudices that I'm not aware of, but I consciously, I really don't. Yeah, you tell me you're Jewish, to me that's definitely not a bad thing. So I don't think I'm.
Plus, I've never heard you calling to an action to harm anybody. So I mean that's kind of where I have that's my litmus test. In other words.
Yeah, well, I got attacked a couple of times for saying things that could be interpreted as, hey, it wouldn't be a bad idea to harm Dick Cheney.
Well, I mean that's different. I mean that's more tongue in cheek. That's more of a playful thing. But again, people don't know how to discern those sort of things.
Right. I certainly am not going to be doing real threats. Well, for one thing, they're illegal. That's unconstitutional. Right. The Constitution doesn't protect genuine threats, but there's no point to doing genuine threats anyway. And of course, I would always prefer to convince somebody or change their heart rather than commit violence against them. On the other hand, there are these situations where people have gotten stuck in a position where violence is kind of a last, or from their viewpoint, the best resort, and it seems justifiable. The Palestinian resistance being an obvious example of that. And of course, I get a lot of pushback for being openly pro-Hamas. Am I allowed to say that on your show?
I think you're allowed to say whatever you want here, to be honest. But I mean, you are a Muslim man now, I believe. That's what you identify with, correct?
Yeah. I practice Islam by doing the Salat prayer, fasting during Ramadan, etc., etc.
And where exactly are you living today, by the way, Kevin, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I don't know how exactly you want. I'm not
Well,
giving you my
not
address.
precisely. Yeah, not precisely, yes.
On the other hand, even if I did, the post office cannot find my place. They can't deliver anything here, so I probably maybe the Mossad couldn't either. But I'm in Saidia, Morocco.
Okay, so you're in Morocco.
Northeast corner of Morocco, where the Mediterranean meets the Algerian border.
Interesting. Is the coffee as good as they claim?
Moroccan coffee is pretty good.
It's pretty good? Okay.
It varies. The standard stuff is kind of a little bit bitter like tar, but it's kind of good. And then some cafes have it better than others.
Interesting. And before you moved there, you were here in the States, obviously, right?
Yeah, I was in Wisconsin for a long time, from 1995 through 2020.
And were you already practicing Islam at that time?
Yeah, I started practicing Islam I embraced Islam and officially converted to Islam in 1993.
Okay, so going back to 93, when you first were kind of getting into it, obviously you had your peers that were they saying things like, "What are you doing? You know, why are you like a Muslim?" Like, were people questioning you in that regard?
Not that much. This was in San Francisco at first,
Oh,
and
okay,
then
San Francisco. Okay.
so 1993, Arab Community Center, San Francisco. I converted, got married to my wife is Moroccan and Muslim,
Hmm.
and lived in San Francisco for a couple of years. Moved to Madison, Wisconsin, to get my PhD, and throughout that whole period, the 90s, right up to 9/11, there was really not much. Being Muslim wasn't that different from being Buddhist. It was like
Yeah.
it was just one of those weird Eastern religions. And they started to rev up the terrorism propaganda, but it wasn't really kicking in. And so post 9/11, it was a completely different world with just massive Islamophobia, massive, ridiculous
It's still that
preconceptions about
way.
Islam.
It's still
Yeah,
that
it's
way.
a
And
lot.
I was
Yeah,
sort of looking for one of those stories where it's like, you have these people around you and they find out they're like, this white man's a Muslim. This is outrageous.
yeah, yeah. I get some of that in the comments at the UNS review, unz.com. It's because Ron is open to these racialist kinds of things, scholarly type racialist perspectives, and so he attracts a bunch of white boys who Lyndon calls them the
People
angry white
really
boys.
they really don't like the Muslims around here, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is all because of 9/11. It's because 9/11 was designed to do that. So everybody who hates Muslims really should know that they have been manipulated at the unconscious level, that a very sophisticated program was run on them, and that the reason they hate Muslims has nothing to do with anything in reality. It has everything to do with a trauma-based mind control operation.
I just find it outrageous that you could pretty much shout at the top of any roof that you pretty much hate them and want them dead. And you're legally fine. Nothing will ever happen to you here in America. Everything's perfectly fine if you sort of spew your hatred towards the Muslims out there. Perfectly fine. But if you say anything about the other tribe with the small hats, they
Right,
freeze
the
your
ones who
bank
actually did blow up the
account.
World Trade Center. Yeah.
They'll crucify you, on the cross here in America.
Yeah, yeah, that is it's annoying, and that's been, a constant annoyance ever since 9/11. Like 9/11 really did screw things up. Like, and those are the two areas where it's just so obvious. Now, everybody thinks about the wars, but actually, it essentially destroyed free speech. Like I said, the universities were like it's night and day, pre
Yeah.
9/11, post 9/11. And then, if you tried being a Muslim like I did in the 90s, pre 9/11, and then post 9/11, it's a whole different world. It's just completely different and vastly worse. People are acting just stupidly and evilly in ways that they didn't before 9/11, and 9/11 did it to them.
And in terms of politics in America right now, again, we briefly talked about how it's evolved into whatever the hell it is anymore. It's it's a weird thing, Kevin, to keep it simple here and polite for the listeners at home. I could say all kinds of things, but I just don't know where the future has in store for us in America the next 5 years. I'm a bit confused by it. I don't see any hope for the left or the right or for the American people in general.
Yeah, I don't really either, which is one reason I left. Uh,
I don't blame
I
you.
I feel more comfortable in Morocco at so many levels. Like people basically see things the way I do. There's enough respect for free speech and free thought as long as you don't cross certain pretty clear red lines that it's actually more comfortable there than the US as
What
well.
would be a red
And,
line? Just an example.
oh, yeah, you don't want to rudely criticize the king of Morocco.
Oh,
That's
that
one.
sounds about, that's necessary. You're right there where they are. So yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it is different. Like you can rudely criticize Trump, which I do all the time,
Sure.
in the US, because he's not like this sort of sacred figure, but the king of Morocco, the throne is. And so, and likewise, you can't too rudely criticize religion, not just the Islamic religion, but, I think you'll have a lot worse time if you were to say bad things about Jesus in Morocco than
Oh,
if you said the same things in the United States.
interesting, interesting. And yes, uh, going with the sort of the Charlie Kirk angle here for just a quick second. I just found it kind of astounding that the Republicans have used his death to sort of almost saint Charlie Kirk. Saint Kirk, I like to call him now. He's viewed as this sort of angelic figure now.
Well, it's interesting that it kind of is bifurcated now, because on the one hand, you have the dumb conservatives who are buying the Ben Shapiro stuff and see Charlie Kirk as this heroic conservative pro-Israel martyr. And of course, that's why they killed him, was to create that. But all of the smart conservatives see Charlie Kirk as a heroic martyr figure as well, because he was about to radically transform his expressed views on Israel and the genocide. And he was probably going to endorse Tucker Carlson's series on 9/11, which would have given that series immensely more impact than it's actually had. And indeed, that series would have debuted on 9/11 itself this year. But then Charlie was shot on the 10th, and that didn't happen. So anyway, both sides are in the conservative movement. The smart ones, the sort of Nick Fuentes types, and the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, the Ron Unz readers, those people have this, they've turned Charlie into a martyr of somebody. He's martyred because he turned against the Zionists and the liars. And then the other side, it's the opposite. It's like he's the Zionist martyr. So everybody agrees he's a martyr among the conservatives. And maybe that's why when the Democrats say bad things about him, they get attacked and lose their jobs, because all the conservatives like Charlie.
It's incredible. And what is your assessment of former U.S. President Donald Trump's relationship with Zionist power brokers?
Oh yeah, and I wish it weren't the case, but I really think that he's been pretty much owned by those people for his entire career. He was he was basically created by the local New York City Jewish mafia power broker Roy Cohn, who, like
I
so many
remember him, yes.
so many mafiosi figures, he was a lawyer who could get you sprung in all kinds of ways, many of them illegal. He relayed J. Edgar Hoover's orders to destroy politicians. So he was the guy that J. Edgar Hoover would call to get stuff done, to get rid of politicians that Hoover didn't want. And Hoover was himself, of course, owned by Meyer Lansky, the Jewish head of organized crime for the Western Hemisphere during his lifetime. Lansky had blackmail photos of Hoover and his boyfriend, Clyde Tolson. And so anyways, this Roy Cohn character, the mafiosi lawyer from New York, met Donald Trump when Trump was like 20 years old or something.
Yeah.
And they became inseparable. And there are rumors of some kind of homosexual relationship where Trump was Roy Cohn's boy toy.
There's been rumors, I've heard, yes.
Yeah. So whether or not that's true, Roy Cohn certainly did create Donald Trump as a public figure and teach him his shtick.
And he did groom him, that's for sure.
Yeah, he groomed him for that. And Trump's been basically a money launderer for organized crime his whole career.
His whole career,
hotels,
yeah.
Especially his casinos. Casinos are money laundering operations. That's what they're for. You bring your crime money into the casino, you buy chips, you don't spend very many of them, then you turn the chips back into clean money and you walk out. That's what a casino is for. And Trump runs those casinos for the people that gave him the money to put up the casinos. That's his job. So Trump has been an organized crime frontman for his entire career, a bit of a spectacle hawkster kind of entertainer as well. And who are these criminals that own him? Well, their top level is Jewish, and they tend to be very hardcore Zionists. Meyer Lansky was tight with Israel, although he had a few beefs with the Israeli government here and there. And so the kosher Nostra basically has owned and operated Donald Trump throughout his entire life.
Amazing. And I think this kind of went over your head when I said former U.S. President Donald Trump, referring that the actual president is Benjamin Netanyahu. It almost seems that way at times, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that these rumors of some kind of split are true. The American national security community obviously is, a lot of those people look askance at the kind of just ridiculous kind of way that the U.S. since Trump and Biden has been kowtowing to Netanyahu. I mean, even a lot of Zionists, a lot of hardcore Zionists like Thomas Friedman of the New York Times are appalled by all this. So there is some pushback, and now Trump is presumably, forcing the ceasefire on Netanyahu, but some ceasefire. They're still slaughtering people. I haven't seen anything to convince me that Trump or whoever is running him has broken free
I
from
don't
Netanyahu.
I don't think so either. I did see those stories and people were all happy on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. People were celebrating. They're saying, "Oh yeah, they're saving Israel for last." I thought, "Lord help us. These people are completely idiots." Just utter idiocy from some of these folks that believe Israel's being saved for last. These are the sort of QAnon people,
Yeah, that and
unfortunately.
QAnon looks like a pretty obvious psyop.
Pretty
Now,
much,
and
and furthermore, I wanted to quickly mention Putin. By the way, what are sort of your thoughts on that situation with Putin? Again, you hear these sort of stories that Trump, he's getting deals done, things are going well, and of course they met over in Alaska, and then the next day he's still pretty much devouring Ukraine.
well, yeah, the Russians. It's not just Putin; it's the whole Russian state knows this is an existential issue for them. If they if they lose in Ukraine, like there's no more Russia, and like they said, well, what's the use of a world without Russia? So it's an existential issue. They will go to nuclear war at whatever level. They'll push it as far as they have to not lose. So that's why this is a stupid war from the Western, especially American perspective, because you can't win if you have the world's biggest nuclear power as your enemy, and they're willing to go as far as necessary with their nuclear weapons to not lose. Well, there's no way to defeat them. I mean, it's ridiculous. This stupid war.
And I
But
agree.
yeah. So it's not Putin. If Putin goes, the next Russian leader will probably be more hardline than Putin. So it's a Russian national security imperative to not lose the war in Ukraine, and there's nothing that Trump or anyone else could possibly do about
And I know we are kind of short on time here,
it.
but
Yeah.
going back to just simple things really quickly here, I just had two more to give you here, which I should have asked in the beginning. But how do you sort of address the ethical implications of, let's say, promoting views that mainstream society often labels as "quote unquote" extremist or misleading, Kevin?
Well, it all depends on which ones, but there are a lot of correct views, very defensible views that are so labeled, such as defense of the axis of resistance against Zionist genocide, the Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the, uh, the Iranians, and so on and so forth. They're really morally on the right side of things, and you're not supposed to say that. That's supposedly so extremist. Likewise, with so many other things, the truth about 9/11, JFK, long list of issues is labeled extremist, conspiracy theories, anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And at this point, that's just so common that when people start saying that about your ideas, it probably means that you're on the right track.
Love that. And of course, your website is truthjihad.com. And I've been really enjoying your website, enjoyed your work for several years now. And it's been quite the pleasure to talk to you finally here, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate your support over the years, and sounds like you're doing a great radio show.
Oh, well,
So
thank you very
hope to
much.
talk again.
And Kevin, yeah, let's do it again. We'll have more time and we'll get into more current issues and that sort of jazz. But before you leave us, go ahead and plug anything you'd like, anything coming up here, Rumble, all that sort of jazz. Let the people know.
Yeah, the best place to find my stuff is by way of either truthjihad.com or kevinbarrett.substack.com. And they're kind of linked together too. So that's probably enough. And then you'll find the Rumble videos and the BitChute videos. And maybe you'll find me at the UNZreview.unz.com, which is well worth reading. That's probably enough.
Nope, no problem, no problem. Thank you so much, Kevin, and I'll see you on the other side, my friend.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael. Take care.
And there he goes, boys and girls. That was a quick little report there with Mr. Kevin Barrett. He's a busy man. He's got to go record his own program right now, but I do thank him for being a part of the program, and I do thank you for pressing play wherever you hear this. And yes, for those wondering, for those asking me via email about the merchandise, that's going to come back, by the way. I'm going to relaunch the store, and we'll have all kinds of things to pick from. And we will be debuting a new shirt. I'm very, very excited to show all of you out there. Now let's bring in Mr. Leo Zagami.
Hello, always a pleasure.
Very nice. There he is on camera. Leo, good to see you, my friend. How's it going?
Oh, good. It's one of the best times of the year here in Palm Springs, as you know, a little bit more fresh, a little bit
Fresh.
more bearable. And
Yeah.
we are definitely working out this new book with a lot of promotion, and it's going very well. The results are really good because this is my first book, you see, that is outside the confession series. So I was a little bit, wondering how it's going to go. I have done other books in the past out of the Confession series, which terminated with Volume 12, and it was, of course, a great success, also because it came out just after the death of Pope Francis and the election of Pope Leo XIV. That was more or less the time frame which it came out. So it was a big success. I had books like Pope Francis the Last Pope. I had the books like Invisible Master. I had other books that are not part of the Confessions of an Illuminati series, but this one is one of the most significant. And if you wonder why Pope Francis was the last Pope, well, in terms of traditional papacy, on June 13th of last year, Pope Francis issued a document where he kind of receded from the primacy of Rome.
Right.
So at this point, we no longer have really a pope. In fact, the pope, as you know, welcomed after a few hundred years, 500,
My
the
goodness.
King of England, Charles, who he co-celebrated a very important ritual. So things have really changed when it comes down to the Catholic faith. And like I said, I had in a way predicted all that with my book. My books are always about forecasting things, but they're also about defining things in a different way. And in this case, we are in front of a book which gives a completely new perspective, a new way of seeing things in regards to Jeffrey Epstein, because Jeffrey Epstein is one of the most discussed cases of the last few years, as you know, with many books, many articles, thousands of articles, and probably hundreds of books on the topic. But nobody really did a book about his ancestry, about the ancestry of the people involved with him, including Ghislaine Maxwell, the people of his milieu, how they build up Jeffrey Epstein to be Jeffrey Epstein. And that is something that really is missing in the equation, let's say.
No, you're right. A lot of people don't discuss that. And by the way, can you hold up that book, by the way? I want to see the cover of that.
The cover is amazing.
Oh,
and
look
it's
at that.
A cover that I worked with a real master from Umbria, an artist called Vincenzo Viceversa. He uses very much the cut-up technique of William Burroughs and Brian Geisen. This cut-up technique in this case was based on the fact that Epstein was both the monster of Mary Shelley as well as Dr. Frankenstein, because he was also a sort of mad scientist. And this book explains all that.
Love that.
And of course, Frankenstein, the name also relates to the Sabbatean Frankenstein, because it was partly inspired by Jacob Frank, aside from the Castle of Frankenstein.
Very nice. And of course, your book opens up with a comparison between Frankenstein, the Golem, and Jeffrey Epstein. And what ways do you see Epstein as a modern day golem and an artificial being created by human hubris?
No, well, I would say that you see, when you're talking about the golem and Frankenstein, it's very important for people to understand the connections that inspired Mary Shelley, whose husband then was also involved in writing a very important book about the Wandering Jew, and the actual link that is between the Frankenstein and the Golem. The Golem and Frankenstein's monsters share, let's say, a common theme, because the Golem is a creature from Jewish folklore, typically made of clay, as you know, that is kind of brought to life through mystical religious formulas of Kabbalah and so on. And it becomes like a protector for the Jewish community, but then in later years, it gets out of control. Now, it's those rabbis involved with the alleged creation of the golem. Apparently, there was also a very direct link with with fighting Sabbateanism and then Sabbatean Frankism, and the fact that Jewish mysticism and the Kabbalah itself, Lurianic Kabbalah as we call it, was infiltrated and manipulated by the followers of this Jewish movement initially, because initially, you know, people were actually, half of the Jewish population in the world was following Jacob Frank. So it wasn't really a sect. It was really embracing the Messiah and believing he was the Messiah.
Right.
Then
For those,
things changed when he was forced to convert to Islam in 1666. And at that point, his most close followers continued to follow him, actually justified the whole thing as part of this descending into sin and finding some kind of redemption, because it's redemption through sin, the whole concept around Sabbateanism. And but of course, he lost most, if there was over half of the Jewish population in the world following him at that point, there was a minority, but that minority stayed very faithful, especially in the Ottoman Empire. They were known as the Domme. They did the same thing as Shabbatai Zevi. They practiced outwards Islam, and indoors they practiced Judaism. Now, this is not the first time this happens in Jewish history, because if you remember, during the Spanish Inquisition, we have also the phenomena of the conversos and the marranos. The marranos were the ones who converted to the Catholic faith forcefully but didn't believe in it and continued to practice Judaism, while instead the conversos were the genuine converts. Now, in regards instead to Sabbateanism, it was converting to Islam, and that conversion brought to Shabbatai Zevi as the first representative of a triad that then culminated with Jacob Frank. However, in Thessaloniki, which is known also as Salonika, today is in Greece, but that was an epicenter, also a very powerful center of Judaism and of the Sabbatean faith during the Ottoman Empire. We find there Baruch Russo also claimed immediately after the death of Shabbatai Zevi to be his reincarnation, perform miracles, and so on. When Jacob Frank gets bought by his family from Ukraine all the way to Thessaloniki, and his family was a family of Sabbateans. His uncle had actually been investigated by the rabbinical authorities and the local authorities. Then usually the rabbinical authorities would ask the help of the actual Christian authorities to then go after when they were investigating for heresy somebody. So they escaped what is now modern day Ukraine, and they went to Thessaloniki, and then he discovered in itself he had an illumination that he was a reincarnation, because he was born exactly 100 years after Shabbatai Zevi. The Dome accepted him as a reincarnation, but for him that wasn't enough, and so he went back to the Catholic Podolia, which is Poland, the Lithuanian Polish Commonwealth back then, and he started to convert the people that some of them were already following Sabbateanism, but he brought a new element because he got them to embrace Catholicism instead than Islam outwards. And that was the moment in which the most nefarious element of Sabbateanism, the Frankist element, evolves in Eastern Europe, but then later also arrives in Germany, arrives in Austria, modern day Austria, and the Austro-Hungaric Empire in Hungary. And at that point, what happens is that with this evolution, transformation, he brings 20,000 Jews to convert to Catholicism, initially telling them to marry only within each other, but then after, when there was the rabbinical authorities and the Catholic Inquisition that was investigating him, he then at that point started to devise a new way which meant embracing and forcing his most devoted followers to marry in the most prominent Catholic, noble, and aristocratic families back then. No? The aristocratic families that will give him their name when they will baptize them into the Catholic faith. So this was a way of insinuating themselves in the Catholic nobility, especially the black nobility close to the Vatican, as well as other forms of nobility around mostly, but not only Eastern Europe, because Sabbatean Frankist cult, as well as the Sabbatean initial Sabbatean cult, was spread all over, like I said. And this golem, this creature,
Right.
is important in this story because it's part of the black magic,
Yes.
because the golem initially was a protector in his early legend, being the golem of Prague. But later on, strangely, when Sabbatean Frankists came along, the golem gets out of control and starts maybe killing its own
Destroying
creator.
everything, yeah.
It's symbolic, of course. It can
Mhm.
be symbolic, but it's also, I mean, you have from at the moment you have one of the most scary movies around, Frankenstein, which is probably the number 1,000 movie made on
Yeah.
Frankenstein, since there's been so many movies. Especially, of course, we remember the 1931 one when it says it's alive, it's
Classic,
alive.
right.
So let's not forget that one of the most old German expressionist movies, silent movies, was
Mhm.
The Golem. It was actually a movie of great importance within the German expressionism. Now, people might not know that, but 100 years ago, actually over 100 years now, when The Golem came out, it was 1915, there was a really thriving cinema force in Germany that brought out some incredible movies. I mean, when
Yeah, this is
for
true.
example, Metropolis, Faust, there is movies that really made the history of cinema. I mean,
Right.
Der Golem was shown in the US at the time as the monster of fate. And we can say that maybe at the time there wasn't really actually a barrier due to the language because it was silent movies.
Right.
So, so it kind of, and it was inspired on this Jewish folk tale, on the old story of the golem involving Rabbi Jude ben Bezabel, who was a very important figure within Judaism. And the golem becomes this, like I said, initially, the golem really protects their people from the anti-Semites. We have also the fact that, of course, the film The Golem, for example, of 1915, was based also on Gustav Mehring's novel The Golem. We know that Gustav Mehring was himself a very esoteric figure, because some of his books are really, of his works and his, they're made out of, maybe like in this case, supernatural fiction, but they are really based on esoteric elements. And he was the illegitimate son of a baron and so on. But in any case, the golem is in modern times depicted, when it comes down to the film, searching the ruins of Jewish temple, we find this statue of the golem that has been brought to life for centuries earlier. It's all based, of course, like I said, the golem tale was very popular back then, and it stays within the Jewish folklore to a level that then modern day Jews, like Jeffrey Epstein, went into creating their own golem with Sophia the robot, for example. Because Sophia the robot is now one of the most popular robots, and people don't really link Sophia the robot to has achieved so much success also publicly with Jeffrey Epstein. But the actual software by Hanson Robotics was actually financed by Jeffrey Epstein.
That I didn't know. And by the way, just for those that want even more about this golem, the golem in Jewish folklore represents like a creature made from clay and it's animated through mystical rituals. And I found it kind of profound that you actually compared the two because of Jeffrey Epstein, of course, because of there was all sorts of rituals that he was doing. So he kind of is a golem, actually, which is pretty interesting.
And at the same time, he's a Frankenstein.
And that too,
because
yeah.
Frankenstein is also a creature that coming to life in a similarly dramatic fashion. You have also elements that are very indicative in the story of Frankenstein. The scientist Harry Frankenstein went to school in Ingolstadt, the place where the Illuminati were founded in 1776. We know that one of the most important moments in the story of Jacob Frank was his triumphant entry in Frankfurt. And that was the moment in which he will be embraced by some of the most powerful families, like, for example, the Rothschild. But the Rothschild are only one of the many families of this story. And in fact, in this book, I explain how the mega group of Lex Wexner, founded in 1991, becomes also a very important elite group of Illuminati, the elite of the B'nai Brit that supports Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein is built by this elite of people. He's not the product of himself. So in a way, he is himself. Not only later on, he will become the mad scientist who wants to seed the world with his semen, do experiments in the
eugenics and New Mexico, right?
And all that. But that is later. At the beginning, Jeffrey Epstein is being constructed, is being launched, is being recruited by Donald Barr, who himself, people say Donald Barr. They think he's a Catholic because he they know William Barr, they know the other son, all the people in his family are Catholics today. But in reality, it's a Sabatian Frankist family, and Donald Barr, who used to be an OSS agent, by the way, converted to Catholicism in a late moment of his life, later in his life. So he was a Sabatian Frankist, a Jewish Sabatian Frankist. Is the only one who will convert later in life to Catholicism.
Oh, I see.
And so he recruits Jeffrey Epstein a year after publishing his Space Relations. I'm sure you heard about that.
Right.
Which codifies in a sci-fi fiction book all the teachings of Sabatian Frankists, including the use of pedophilia and all kinds of sadomasochistic stuff and weird rituals and things, but presented in a sci-fi way. It becomes acceptable for a schoolmaster because the guy was directing a school, a preppy school called Dalton, which then employed Jeffrey Epstein, who didn't have any
credentials or anything.
No, nothing. But that was the beginning of his career. Then Lex Wexner, also Robert Maxwell, the others come into the equation. And already in the middle of the 80s, they give him, soon after, this building in New York, in one of the most fancy neighborhoods, rigged with cameras and everything, and said, "You are the aspiring master, and you work for us." But it's different from how the media is conceiving this whole thing. The media says, "Oh, Epstein was working for the Mossad. Oh, Epstein was working for the FBI. Oh, Epstein was working for the CIA." No, it doesn't work like that, guy. It's the CIA, the Mossad, the FBI, the MI6, any other intelligence agency that is working for the Sabatian Frankists. It's a different thing.
Yes.
They are the ones in charge, not the other way around. In fact, in the mega group, I don't know if you heard about the mega group, this Jewish study group that then became very much, around Jeffrey Epstein's work with Les Wexner. Lex Wexner even gives them the power of attorney at one point because he's working for them. And, if you're a billionaire, you don't give your power of attorney to a nobody, but you give it to somebody who is working for you doing some critical operation. And the mega group, have you ever heard of the mega group?
I have, actually, yes.
The mega group is this, group disguised under philanthropy and pro-Israel activities. In reality, is an elite B'nai Brit. It's like what the Illuminati of Adam Weishaupt were for Freemasonry, which in a way was itself a golem or a Frankenstein because it went out of control,
Right, exactly.
the mega group was for the B'nai B'rith. So the people in the mega group, from Steven Spielberg to Marvin Lander, who pioneered the bagels for a mass, and then you have Ronald Steve Lauder, who is one of the most powerful people,
Yeah, these are
I
heavy
mean,
hitters
you're
for
talking
sure.
about Esther Lauder Cosmetics here.
Right.
So in the end, what I discovered and what I propose in this book is not really an anti-Semitic interpretation, but it stands by what my friends, Jewish friends like Roseanne Barr and other rabbis also. I mean, Roseanne Barr is not a rabbi, but she has a lot of knowledge about Judaism. She's very much into Judaism because she's Jewish, and she's very much
Right,
also
exactly.
into fighting the enemies of Judaism. They always told me the biggest enemy of the Jew is the Jew itself. Is the Jewish people themselves. In fact, the Sabbatean Frankists were the worst enemy ever. As I demonstrate in my book, they were behind the Holocaust, they were behind the pogroms, they were behind pushing the Jews into reclaiming their own land when they wanted to simply stay maybe in America or in Germany
Right.
or in
I
Poland.
think the whole anti-Semitism thing gets thrown around too blindly in a way, Leo. I feel like people just throw it around too casually, and I think just because you criticize something or bring up the faults
Well,
of something.
that is something that, of course, happens because you have the Anti-Defamation League created, by
Correct.
the way, by the B'nai B'rith,
That's right.
which is itself a paramasonic organization, which in reality, if interpreted in the correct way, means sabotage my illumination. So that is another thing that I reveal in the book with the whole history of the B'nai B'rith. But in regards to the elite that was behind Epstein, it was also the elite of the B'nai B'rith. It was the elite of the financial lodge of the B'nai B'rith, for example. So we can say that, there is a dark stream of occult knowledge that passes through Sabbatai Zevi all the way to Anton LaVey, through Alistair Crowley, which I actually bring the receipts for, the documents. I mean, I don't simply state Crowley sounds like Shabbatai Zevi or Jacob Frank. I actually bring the receipts saying there is an order called the Asiatic Brethren. It's cited in the documents, foundation documents of the OTO. Crowley became then responsible for the OTO in England and then took over the show. And he obviously was connected to those teachings.
Right, and Anton LaVey is a Jewish man, by the way.
And Anton LaVey was a Jewish man, and
Yes.
not any kind of Jewish man. His family came from one of the, let's say, hot spots of the Sabbateans. So it's like his name is Howard Stanton Levi, or spelled also Levi. He came from a Jewish family in Chicago with roots in Thessaloniki, which is the place where Jacob Frank found his inspiration and claimed to be the incarnation, where Sabbatai Zei established his biggest community, and where you have also Baruch Russo, who was the second of this triad, this trinity of messiahs, of false messiahs that created the Sabbatean.
And that's no coincidence either, by the way.
No, absolutely. So, and so he played, I mean, the family of LaVey played a significant role in Thessaloniki's Sephardic community for centuries.
And interesting enough, I talked to a lot of Satanists that don't even know that, by the way, that he's Jewish or was Jewish. It's pretty funny.
The crazy thing is that, when he was dying, he was in a Catholic hospital. And that's where he really realized that he had really screwed up with God.
Yeah.
And he was in complete and utter terror, which is important to understand. I mean, he always had this sense of security. He was claiming he was, the ambassador of Satan on earth for a long time. And he did it on TV, he did it publicly, he did it for the first time in a pop-tastic way, because Satan kind of came with him from 1966 out of
Well,
the
financially,
closet.
it helped him tremendously for his career and all that.
But it's not only that, it's that,
Yeah.
you are leading people astray with the Satanic Bible that became the second most important book in the United States after the Bible.
Absolutely.
So I mean, it's like definitely. So for me to explain
hmm
that these teachings filter, like for example, I have a whole chapter dedicated to the mentor of Madame Blavatsky, Max Theon. And Max, people don't really know much about Max Theon. Max Theon was a Sabbatean Frankist from within an Hasidist, because Hasidism became the reaction to the Sabbatean Frankist. It's like, let's say this, Sabbatean Frankists created two adverse reactions. On one side, we had the secularization of Judaism pushed by those Jews who went into the Masonic lodges, the Illuminati, that it pushed them towards secularization. And then the reactions, though, of, to all the heresy that was practiced within the Sabbatean Frankists, because in this book, I go very much in detail with the actual books that I consider holy by the Sabbatean Frankists, the various controversies within the rabbinical community about these teachings. I mean, there were teachings that were out of this world. I mean, they make Crowley look like a little angel.
Right.
I mean, like, for example, their interpretation of King David going on top of a mountain and engaging in an homosexual rite with God. I mean, come on, it's just like some screwed up stuff that comes, with a guy, a spy that it almost looks like him and Victor Neuburg in the desert evoking Quran. So the book which I'm publishing for the first time also, because see, at the moment there is a lack of knowledge. That's why my book has been number one in history of Judaism, in Jewish religious history. It's been very praised already by a lot of people within the Jewish community because they can't find anything wrong with it. I state the facts. I don't speculate. And that's why at the end of the book, I have almost 500 footnote sources and all from credible sources that will not lead anybody to say, Zagami is pushing this,
Yeah.
Zagami is pushing that. When I cite, for example, something a little bit controversial, I deem it controversial. So in reaction to eventual criticism that this book might generate, because of course now this book is being studied by the rabbinic community. It's a book that is making some really heavy statements here. I mean, but is making them backed by evidence.
So you've been historically accurate in this book, obviously, and that's one of the reasons why I always liked your work, Leo. It seems like you kind of leave no stone unturned, and you are giving sources. And again, it's been a lot of your books, by the way, I feel that way, they're pretty accurate to me. And by the way, you claim that aspects of Judaism helped facilitate the cover-up of pedophilia in Israel. Are you?
Well, that is the beginning of the book.
Are you?
And I tell you, and I tell you why I wanted to start with that, because today one of the countries that really covers more pedophilia is either the Vatican, which is a small country with only 900 inhabitants, so it's a very small reality, but then they cover up for millions of priests worldwide.
And by the way, Leo, just a quick note, and obviously you still sort of identify as being a Catholic, I believe, correct?
I was born a Catholic.
Yeah, you were born a Catholic, but still, do you still?
I mean, remember one thing, that I am a critical being, and so I'm a guy who thinks with my own mind. I don't follow people. When I went, to the Vatican and made my work known, I thought they might excommunicate me. Instead, they said Leo is an original.
I remember the early days with Leo. Yeah. I remember your early days on InfoWars and going into all this. And the reason why I'm asking is I was curious if any of these sort of things that you have sort of discovered and learned about Catholicism, if that's ever sort of like swayed you in terms of thinking, well, this isn't exactly a productive sort of religion overall. This is probably bad. Has that ever
The
happened?
same can be said in my time when I lived for a couple of years within the Jewish community in the Jewish ghetto in Rome, and they brought me to learn everything about, because that's what I did. I went into every religion and I
Yeah.
lived with the, like when I married actually a Muslim woman and I lived within the Muslim
Which I
world.
appreciate that about you, Leo. It's not
So
like you
it's
don't
not
have.
like an experience
Yeah.
that is simply academic. It's an
Absolutely.
experience that is direct. When I
Yeah, you got in there.
talk
That's why I'm
about-
saying I like that you, you got your feet wet. You're actually in there. It's not like you're speaking from an outside perspective, which is why I'm bringing this up. I appreciate that about you, Leo.
No, but
Mhm.
for example, when it comes down to the Russian side of things, the fact that there the Sabbatean Frankists were always treated like an elite during the Soviet times, that is an experience that I experienced myself directly when I was in Russia. I actually interviewed people close to the head rabbi, Jewish Sabbatean Frankists who were my friends who actually told me certain things who were interesting and I deemed of interest for this book. So it's also, direct experience. And I'm
Sure.
glad that I had such a, let's say, picturesque life around the world that I could now rely on that experience to bring a more accurate and personal version of the events.
Love that. And by the way, speaking of the cover up of pedophilia in Israel, are you referring to the institutional cover ups or something deeper within religious doctrine or sectarian power structures?
Much deeper.
Much deeper. Okay.
It's much deeper because I explain what, you see, Sabbatean Frankism has not really been discussed that much by the Jewish academic world because there is, like I explained, always been a sort of a sense of shame by the rabbinical community that people of their own would do certain things. And so they covered up. It's a little bit like the Catholic Church, So actually I find a lot of similarities between the two. It's like
Me too.
It's like the Catholic Church wouldn't admit certain things because
Yes.
it would damage them, and the same thing is the rabbinical community. So when you have, for example, tens of thousands of pedophiles operating in Israel every year, leading to about 100,000 victims annually, and this is something that is it's not my data, it's the data of the Matzov Association, an organization that is actively keeps tracks of reports of Israel pedophiles in the media and centralize the data monthly. So, this is important.
Very.
The fact that, and I explained, is not restricted to one form of Judaism as they would like you to think, because they might accuse, for example, the Orthodox or the reformist or the reconstructionist or the liberal or the progressive or whatever. In reality, is widespread in all forms of Judaism, and is simply because Israel has this religious identity, a little bit like the Vatican, and so the moment in which you go and attack the people who are responsible for it, but also there's another reason. You see, So it's about all Jewish movements. That was very important for me to stress from the very beginning of the book. But also very important that who has been talking about the Sabbatean Frankists? Very few historians. One of the most known was Gershom Scholem. He must have been a giant. He died in 1982, but he was a giant, really. His study, also his knowledge of Kabbalah, but also as an historian, he was a giant. Since then, we had, of course, here in America, Marvin Stuart Antelman, but he was more controversial. He was the one who excommunicated Henry Kissinger in 1976 because he was a Sabbatean Frankist in his eyes. But then today, if I had to say, first of all, today, if you go to Tel Aviv University or Jerusalem, you will find yourself in difficulty in finding people who really know about Frankism. One of the few academics today who touches on this topic is Pavel Masleko. Have you ever heard of him, Masleko?
I think I vaguely have actually heard the name.
He has written a book
times.
called The Mixed Multitude.
Yeah.
But the problem with both Gershom, Scholem, or with him is that inevitably these academics have always a leftist mindset.
Oh, of course, of course.
So what do they do? They admit that this Sabbatean Frankism has influenced a lot the contemporary society in Israel. That's why I start with my book showing that there is something really wrong in Israel with all this tolerance. But where is it born of? Where is this liberal mindset born of? And then we go back gradually and bring them to analyze each facade, each aspect of the Sabbatean and Frankist cults. And then you see that, modern Israel or modern Judaism is the product of their past and is the product of this heresies which push the Jewish community in one direction. And of course, that direction was far and far and far away from the Mosaic laws. Now, the Mosaic laws, the Sinai laws, we don't have only 10 commandments. We have 613 precepts that need to be followed. We can't cherry pick one or the other if we want to really be. And that is what happens with, for example, Reform Judaism here. That is the biggest form of Judaism that has transgender rabbis but even the conservative Judaism has got corrupted because suddenly we have an Hasidic Jew that might become a transgender tomorrow morning.
Pretty much.
That is part of the Reconstructionist movement, which from the 50s has been another plague within Judaism. And yes, I had one guy, Jewish guy, said, but you shouldn't ascribe everything to the Sabbatean Frankists. And I said, no, I'm going to ascribe everything to the Sabbatean Frankists because I can prove it. That's why I wrote this book. I showed the things in a way that the non-Jew can understand them, of course.
The
but
Goyim,
also
right.
the Jewish person can read this book and say, okay, Leo Zagami is respectful of the fact that this is not a problem of the Jewish race. This is a problem of a sect that has infiltrated Judaism and who has led astray a whole group of people. On top of that, of course, I cite the claims from within the Jewish community, so I can't be called anti-Semite when I show that the Shoah, the Holocaust, was a product of the Sabbatean Frankists. The transfer agreement was a product of the Sabbatean Frankists. Adolf Hitler was himself product of a ritual in 1888, as Rabbi Anterman said. It was my late friend Barry Kamish, who fought for the IDF, who was a great, I don't know if you remember Barry Kamish, used to do some excellent radio shows in his late years before he died when he moved to Florida. We used to collaborate on the same radio. And he said, Israel is a Sabbatean state. From that moment onwards, I always kept listening in my head this thing. Israel is, why is it a Sabbath? Who founded Israel? And that's why I go back to the very foundation of Israel. I show what happened with Theodor Herzl, the beginning of the Zionist movement, how it was quickly then elaborated, this, in the early 20th century. It's almost like you create two factions that you can manipulate. The one is the labor Zionist, the other one is the conservative form of Zionist, that instead are connected to this gentleman here.
Yeah, religion is a great tool, obviously, to
but
control
it's not
the
only
masses.
religion here, because Zionism is
Yeah.
not a question of religion. Zionism is actually not. I think that Zionism is actually more politics, geopolitics than religion, because what happens is Theodor Herzl arrived, and what symbol does he use? Does he use the menorah, which is the classic religious symbol? No, he uses the Star of David.
The
It's
Star of
not
David,
a religious David. It's two triangles that represent the opposites of Judaism. He had to, in the 19th century, when the Zionist movement develops as Zionist movement, but in reality was born a long time before, and I showed in my book, at the time of Oliver Cromwell, so we go a lot back a long time, who led the Jews back to England after a few hundred years that they had been kicked out of England. But before going there, eventually we can go there for the end of the broadcast. Zionism was incentivized and inspired by the Anglican Church, first of all. Let's not forget that. Before that, the Puritans. Then, when it manifested within Jewish circles and eventually the name Zionism came around, it was still the backing of the British Freemasons and stuff. Why were all these people obsessed with bringing the Jews back to Israel? To manifest the scriptures and the end times. So they were kind of pushing them to do that. And the Sabbatean Frankists were part of it from the very beginning, because Sabbatai Zevi claimed himself to be the Messiah. But Sabbatai Zevi, as I show in my book, he didn't come with his own original idea. It was his father, Mordecai Zevi, who was working in Smyrna for the English, the Puritans. And there was a guy called Manasseh ben Israel who was connected with Oliver Cromwell, with other people within the Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell is an incredible figure because he's the one who who beheaded the king and led the republic for a brief time in England.
Right, and there's so much I want to ask you, but I know we're not we're kind of limited in time. But I wanted to also ask you: you draw connections between Epstein's technological projects and Sophia the robot. Are you suggesting that AI development sort of carries a similar golem energy, technology animated by a spiritual void, Leo?
First of all, the connections that I make are not speculative, but are proven. I mean, the fact that Epstein has financed the software of Sophia the robot is proven. It's not a conspiracy theory. The fact that he came to announce in 2013 to a journalist that they were working on a robot called Sophia the robot, and the announcement was made officially 3 years later, this gives you an idea. So Epstein was very much into producing something like that. But the moment in which you produce something like that, you are inevitably producing a monster. So it is, people don't know maybe the implications of Jeffrey Epstein beyond, the idea that is projected through the media. He was the pedophile, he was this, he was that. But Jeffrey Epstein was much more than that. Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who had his own office at Harvard University. Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who definitely had a connection with the world of academics, including Bill Gates, including many others, who were not only at Little St. James doing the sexy part, which is, of course, part of the thing. There is a lot more. There is the links to the AI world, and I go very much into depth into all this.
You cover a lot of ground in this book, and that's what I like a lot about you, Leo. Again, you cover a lot of ground, and your books are always spot on. They're always pretty hard hitting. And yeah, there's a lot to Jeffrey Epstein that we still don't know. He's kind of like this mysterious figure that came out of nowhere. And
I want to give you an example of something. A decade ago, a friend of mine found in an archival history regarding Gershon Scholem, which I said, a very important historian, a very important figure, a video in which Gerald Epstein and the wife asked Gershon Scholem and the wife if it would be appropriate to name the Baysack clone of von Neumann's Princeton computer Golem. Gershon Scholem thundered a big no. So we're talking about a guy, like I repeat, who died a few years ago, who was an historian, the major historian that is cited by everybody when it comes down to the Sabbatean Frankists, is revered as a figure also within Israel because, he went and lived. So, Gershon Scholem is not just, but the fact that he was very clear, it would be not only inappropriate, it would be a monstrosity to name the von Neumann's Princeton computer Golem. So this is pretty shocking. That we are discussing today all these links for Jeffrey Epstein. No. But Jeffrey Epstein was a guy who had also, for example, and I repeat, I'm not giving out the whole book, but there is a cover here with a temple that now is no longer of this color. But this temple is based on a bathhouse in Aleppo, which was a meeting ground, notorious meeting ground of the Sabbatean Frankists, of the Sabbateans in particular, the Domme, in Aleppo, Syria. It's now a bathhouse which has a cult, is being deemed as an historical place. So it's, I think it's even in the UNESCO heritage sites. But anyway, Epstein built his temple based on it because he knew exactly what he was doing there.
Oh, he knew.
Absolutely.
Oh, they all know. And one other question I was going to ask you, Leo, was what is up with this sort of obsession with pedophilia in terms of religion, political figures, just bad people in general? Why so much? Why are they so focused on pedophilia? I've always found that very strange and bizarre that there's so much of that. And there's a lot to say about sex trafficking uh, and uh, and specifically Israel. Lots of child prostitutes out there as well. You see a lot of it.
Like I said, unfortunately, the product of this Sabbatean Frankist liberal mindset, because otherwise Israel will not be Israel today. So that's why when you ask me why did you start in that way, and I explained you why, because in the end I connect everything historically, and today in modern Israel, like Antelman used to say, very few people really know much about either they are into the religious side of Judaism, and so they know everything about the religious side, but they don't know anything about how Zionism developed politically, geopolitically, and all the rest.
Right.
Or you can have people who might know about Theodor Herzl, about the history of the Zionists. You see, I'm a very prepared individual because I bring the receipts and I bring the
Oh
books,
my,
man.
look at that.
Encyclopedia of Zionism. This is very rare. A very rare
Yeah, I don't think
text.
I've seen that before, actually, matter of fact.
Huh?
I said, I don't think I've even seen that before.
It's not,
Wow.
not a rich. Let's say that this has been taken from somebody from a Jesuit university.
Yeah, I'm like, I've never seen that before. Interesting.
And it is this guy here, which the old Ben, was the guy who really, it's Theodor Herzl, the guy
There
who
he
was
is.
this journalist who created the Zionist movement, the actual Zionist movement, and this was published in New York in 1971. This encyclopedia, and it gives you a very, I mean, you can imagine a really in-depth analysis of how Israel came together, of the architecture planning even of Israel. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's like every single detail. But people, for example, don't know that the city of Tel Aviv original name was a completely different one, but then it was based on the actual name Tel Aviv was based on a novel by Theodor Herzl, which talks about Sabbatai Zevi also. So these are things that are, I mean, that's why this book I recommend it highly to all my Jewish friends and to the people in Israel. I have a lot of people who follow me in Israel, and they are very much, I think, enthused about it, because this is the first time that they see somebody who, I mean, I have maybe 1% of Ashkenazi Jewish blood. I'm not really Jewish in any way, aside from a minimum percentage of blood, which came from somebody who was adopted in my family a few centuries ago. But having said that, I think that this book is also respectful of Judaism and is respectful of the Jews, because, for example, I explained the misunderstandings around the Khazarians, blaming always everything on the Khazarians, when the Khazarians don't even have a DNA; they simply converted to Judaism. That doesn't make you a Jew. the blame that often is put on the Ashkenazi, when the Ashkenazis actually were the first rabbis who fought Sabbatai, Zevi, and Jacob Frank in a very active way. And I bring this historic accounts in my book.
Amazing stuff.
So this, I think, it's more respectful, but it makes for a much more interesting story.
Oh, I agree. And I again, I have to completely emphasize the fact that you put out great work, Leo. Again, you always go in there, you credit people that need to be credited, you list sources, you go through hell and high water, as they say, Leo, to give us a good, respectable product.
And one other thing that I'm not going to have the time to go into, but I invite you to read in this book is
which I will.
5 major rituals that were celebrated from the dawn of humanity. Because these 5 major rituals, from the very first one, I can attempt to just explain you the first one so you understand the importance of these rituals that include also the Sabbatean Frankist element later, because we are going to the dawn of humanity, in which the first ritual that the elite, let's say.
Yeah, the 5 major rituals of
I don't know if you ever
humanity.
heard of them.
Well, you describe the 5 major rituals of humanity.
Yes.
You tie them to Epstein's circle, I believe.
And yes, the 5th ritual is tied directly with Epstein. But the first one, for example, was at the dawn of humanity, when they implanted a sort of ternary algorithm in our minds. That is, to perform a ternary algorithm, you can adapt a search process involving a freeway division and decision-making process that didn't exist before. It was like the moment in which our existence changed, in which we weren't, previously our perception of reality was different in truth. We weren't even anchored to the material world as we are today. And then they started this first ritual. Then you go for the second one, which was performed at the end of the Paleolithic, which brought us into a further regression in our ability to detach ourselves from the plane of objective reality. And we go through the various rituals until we get to the fourth one, which was born in the 17th century, when the expansion of collective consciousness was entrusted primarily to the work of the Western civilization. That is the moment in which we have also the birth of the Sabbateanism. And, you had, for example, navigation was developing, an increase in ship size. I go through very much the details all the way to the 5th one, which has to do instead with, well, I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, no spoilers. You gave us a lot here, and I really appreciate you being here on the program. That's The Rise and Fall of a Frankist Monster, exposing Jeffrey Epstein and the most powerful Jewish sect in the world. And you are staring at the author, Mr. Leo Zagami. That's leozagami.com. And there's
this
that
is the
book.
back of the book. You see, you have also the Pope.
The Pope right there.
Yeah, and it's explained in this book why the Pope blessed them. And the explanation would blow your mind away.
Amazing.
So, there is a lot of things that definitely are original to this book. I think that at the end of the day, people should have this book, like they should have also Virginia Giuffre's book, to really have a full understanding of what's going on. My book, though, at the end, probably will make you think we are fucked. Sorry, the word. We are screwed. We are.
No, you're right. You got it right the first time. That's true.
We are, because the system is rigged. But there is a reason why it's rigged, and also a reason, like I explained in the introduction, why they will never fully reveal Epstein's files or archives to the people, because revealing it would simply upset the whole system, which is not one party or the other. It's the whole system.
Exactly.
It would just come crumbling down to the. I would love that.
We would all love that, but that's not going to happen.
We will all love that, and who knows if in this lifetime we might even see it happening. But then, like I explained also in the introduction, that will favor our enemies, China, Russia, and I don't know if that's a positive thing.
Maybe not. But Leo, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here on the program as always. And Leo, go ahead and plug your show, the book again. Anything you'd like, go ahead.
Of course, you can find the links to my new book at leozagami.com, together with my latest articles, which I highly suggest you go and check out. The latest one is about actually Zoran Mandani and Alex Soros, George Soros, Sabbath and Frankist, of course. And we have many other very interesting articles that you should check out on leozagami.com. And of course, all the links to my books that you can also find on Amazon. So thank you so much for having me on. As usual, it's always a pleasure to present my books on your show, Michael. Until the next one, hopefully we can maybe speak before the next one.
And that concludes tonight's fun. Oh yes, tonight we ventured into some of the most controversial and unsettling territories in global affairs, politics, and of course spiritual influence. It's been a good one, boys and girls. I really appreciate you being here with me, and I want to thank Mr. Kevin Barrett and Mr. Leo Zagami for spending some time with us here. We will do this again in the near future. If you want bonus material, please go to patreon.com/Michael Decon or go to michaeldecon.com for further info about the program, and I'll see you on the other side. And with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night.
Under blue moon I saw you, so soon you will take me up in your arms, too late to beg you or cancel it, though I know it must be the killing time, unwillingly mine. Fate up against your